The Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Parallax Puddles, Red from the Kaito and Red Show, Sang H, Mike from the Old Switcheroo podcast, Stephen P, Pib Extra, Melissa S, Ryan K, Doug from the Nostalgia Marcanon podcast, Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Gilmer, Matt aka Stormageddon, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, whomst among us hasn't had the life-altering tragedy of our parents being assumed dead, which forces us to live with our aunt for the last 11 years, only to receive a letter 2 days before our 14th birthday to go to some island owned by Jeff Bezos? Whomst, I ask. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, it is a Patreon poll chosen episode. That's right, my patrons voted. I picked 4 different, what did I say? It was like 6th generation handhelds, maybe it was 7th, whatever generation the Nintendo DS is part of, whatever console generation, I forget off the top of my head. But I had 2 PSP games, 2 DS games, and this game that was chosen, as you can see by the title, is Trace Memory for the Nintendo DS. And joining me, first time guest on the show, Derek Van Dyke from the Pixel Spectrum podcast and Castle Bravo podcast. Derek, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Kind of a busy day, kind of a busy evening, but lovely to be here. Lovely to talk about such a unique game that to me is so iconic for like the beginning of the Nintendo DS's lifespan. It's a game I've got a lot of strong feelings about and a lot of strong memories of my own. So this is a good pick.
It fits perfectly with the game. Trace Memory, my patrons chose it, like I said. You're right on the money with that, Derek. Is very much like this game is the epitome of the early DS era. For those who do not know, this game originally came out in 2005, early 2005 in Japan on February 24th, and then it didn't come out in North America until September 27th, 2005. It actually released in Europe and Australia earlier than in North America. And this game, remember, the DS came out in November of 2004. So this game is within the first year of the DS's life cycle.
This is a year 1 title. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And it was definitely designed to showcase what the DS could do. And it does that in two varying degrees of effectiveness. I have like both positive and negative to say about that, but we'll get into all of that in just a moment. To kick off the episode, as we always do, we're going to talk about our personal histories and personal recollections of this game. So Derek, since you are the guest on this episode, I'm going to throw it over to you. What's your personal history with Trace Memory?
So I got Trace Memory it would have had to have been within a month or so of launch. It was pretty quick. I had a Nintendo DS very early. I want to say I got now I have to like look up some release date stuff. I got my DS with Mario Kart DS, which was in November. So I got it almost exactly a year in. So yeah, it would have been like a couple months late. But I was looking for other things to get, and I wanted to find things that were kind of unique. So I ended up with there were a lot of the like touch generation, they were calling it at the time, games, right? Of the idea of like Nintendo has sort of compiled these games from other developing and publishing partners that take real advantage of the DS's unique features, the touchscreen, the double screen, and are giving you something that's more than just like a fancy GBA game. So, I mean, that touch generation label, if I remember correctly, was used for games like Hotel Dusk, for like Trauma Center, Under the Knife. I think there were a couple of other like Nintendo published titles under that, but yeah, so I got it. And I also I grew up. I had no idea what Trace Memory was when I grabbed it, just beyond that it was like a unique title for the DS with good cover art. That was kind of part of that grouping.
Some mid 2000s ass hair on that cover art.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, and here's the thing too, at the time that this came out, I would have been like 14. So age appropriate, cute girl on the cover, but interesting sci-fi thing. I'm going to check this out. But I also grew up on PC games more than anything else. Grew up especially on PC, adventure games and PC RPGs. So the format of here is a game that is effectively, a narrative game where you were exploring a location and solving puzzles and was, to me, very in the vein of games especially old LucasArts adventure games, right? Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, stuff like that. Sam and Max. So I didn't know that's what I was getting, but then I got it and I was like, ooh, this is interesting. And this is something they could never have done on the GBA. So yeah, and I wasn't good at it early on, but eventually, it's funny because the game is, I think, sometimes regarded as being for a younger audience, but a lot of its puzzles are very obtuse. There's a couple of them in particular I definitely had to look up that I was palming my forehead as soon as I actually looked up what the answer was. But yeah, just very, very fond memories of this game. This to me represents the original DS.
I could totally see that. I mean, it like we said, it launched within the first year. I also think it really just is the epitome of what the DS kind of brought to the table for North American gamers, I should say, at least, because prior to that, games like Trace Memory really only existed on PC. So unless you were a kid in the 90s with a PC, which they were more widely adopted then than they were obviously prior to that in the 80s and the 70s, but still there's a reason why PC gaming doesn't get talked about as much as console gaming in North America. It's because it wasn't as widespread as console gaming was. So as much as beloved as the LucasArts games are, and King's Quest and all those games that came out between the 80s and 90s, you still the market size of, or the size of the audience that really found and loved those games, while very passionate, obviously there's a lot of people that talk about it, it's still not as small. It's still smaller compared to the home console. So having Nintendo with the DS bring out games like Trace Memory and other adventure games and stuff like that, and kind of bringing it to a new audience through the touchscreen, through the stylus, was a really smart idea.
Yeah, that, and I think tied alongside that is that Nintendo, and I mean, you saw this with the Wii as well, right? They were trying to not just provide new ways to play and provide new experiences, but also reach out to people who had not been involved in video games before. And the DS obviously blew up, very similar to the Wii. Both blew up with audiences that did not own a Game Boy or a game console meaningfully before that. And not only were they trying to provide new gaming experiences that might feel a little more approachable, or create a fresh starting point that works as well for onboarding, traditional gamers as well as people who are kind of coming into the hobby for the first time, but trying to, with some of their own games and with some of the partner games that they highlighted, bring in ideas, settings, characters that appealed to more than just the standard, teenage boys playing video games. I joked about 14-year-old Derek thinking Ashley was cute, but Ashley is clearly actually designed to be a character who appeals more to women as a player, like especially to teenage girls. She is very much a teenage girl,
yes,
and not in like an idealized or a sexualized or anything like that kind of way. And I mean, in a way, like even at the time, I kind of found that very refreshing. Now, granted, I have some weird relationships with the concept of gender to begin with, you know, so I can easily map onto a teenage girl and be like, wow, this is really nice. But yeah, like I think that trace memory also in a lot of ways represents not just like gameplay, but also Nintendo and a lot of their partners trying to reach out to just a broader audience, bring more women, especially into the gaming space. And, you know, I think there are varying degrees of successful. Trace Memory was not a game that blew up, you know, the sales charts, but it left an impact on everybody who played it. So
yeah,
that's got to be worth something.
And now, real quick, just to, because my experience is very short, and there's some stuff that you said that I want to kind of bounce off of. So before I lose those thoughts that I want to bounce off of, just for the listeners, my experience was nothing. I bought this game because I got into DS collecting later on. I owned a DS like 2009 is when I finally got my DS, maybe like 2008. So I was a little bit late to the party. And even then, I didn't really play it all that much. Handheld gaming as an adult has become a lot more enticing than it was back when I was in college. That's when I was into like PC gaming. That was like my entry point into PC gaming. So I missed out on a lot of great games with the handhelds, and didn't own this, didn't even know about it till a couple years ago when I started like looking for more DS games to add to my collection. I saw the name, looked at the cover art, thought the cover art looked cool and interesting, saw that it got some decent reviews, and that's pretty much my experience prior to playing it for this episode. Now, you were saying, Derek, how like actually like especially the cover art of it, like she is not designed for the male gaze, as a lot of other female protagonists in games around this time were.
I mean, especially 2004. 2004 is not a great time for that.
Yes. It would have been really bad if they had, because once again, she is 14. That would have been really gross if they did that. But
that doesn't stop the Persona series. But
there you go.
Look, I love Persona, but like let's acknowledge gaming as a medium, and anime and anime inspired culture as well are often very bad about girls in that age range. And I think even though at the time in 2004 it was very refreshing to have a 14-year-old girl as the protagonist who not only, like we say, is not sexualized, is not presented as that kind of an object.
Not even
but,
close.
I mean, I think also is not portrayed as like mature for her age. You know what I mean? This is a 14-year-old girl who's kind of difficult in the way that 14-year-olds frequently are, and has kind of a little bit of like a maybe brooding isn't exactly the right word, but she is a little moody in a way that didn't feel even like stereotypical for like a teenage girl. Like that felt like being a 14-year-old, you know?
And you know,
I respect that a lot.
And the stuff that she has to deal with, I don't blame her for being moody at all, because it's like there's some shit she has to deal with.
It's a fairly heavy subject matter in this game.
Yeah, extremely so. Now, a couple of things that you mentioned, like I said, with the fact of how she's presented, I'm not surprised she's presented so well, because the designer and writer of this game is Rika Suzuki, and she has been around the industry for a long time. So it was designed and written by a woman, which I definitely think it makes a lot more sense than what was typically the case of a dude writing for women. But Rika Suzuki, man, she has been around the industry for a while. She started two different game companies, two different game developers, River Hill Soft and the developer of this game, Sing, C-I-N-G, both of which are now defunct. So, you know, take it for what that's worth. But with River Hill Soft, she made a series of games called JB Herald no Jikenbo #1, or JB Herald no Jikenbo, I think it's I don't know what it's. I think in North America it was localized as just JB Harold Murder Club series. That was like the name of the series because the first game is just called Murder Club. So she has a history in doing like murder mystery, point and click adventures. So she and the first JB Harold game, by the way, came out in 1986. So like. This is at this point when this game comes out in 2005. That's nearly 20 years already of just history of developing adventure games. So she worked on that, and like River Hill Soft worked on games up until like early 2000s when the company either went under or I don't know exactly. I didn't do all the research as to what happened to them. It looks like they had a bunch of layoffs.
Sometimes it's hard to get big detailed timelines on these, like especially these Japanese studios that are like really small. You know, there's not exactly a great paper trail on the Western internet for stuff like that.
According to Wikipedia, in June 2004, they filed for bankruptcy and most of its employees left to form a new company called Althi Inc., like ALTHI. Althi, maybe, I don't know. And they absorbed River Hill Soft. But the other company that Rika she co-founded, she wasn't the original founder of, but she co-founded, was Sing, which was the developer of this game. And Sing made a handful of different games. They made obviously this game, which outside of North America was called Another Code: Two Memories, and there was a sequel to it which came out on the Wii, if I remember correctly, but it only originally came out in Japan until recently, like the last 2 years. They did a Nintendo released another code like collection.
I think Another Code R, the Wii game, did make it to Europe. If I remember correctly, because I do remember playing. I actually played Another Code R on the Wii in an English copy that had to have come from Europe. Then I guess because I don't think they gave it a full. It'd have to have been a European.
You are correct. Yes, June 26, 2009. Another Code R came out on the Wii, and then the Another Code Recollection, which came out just a little over 2 years ago, in 2024 for the Nintendo Switch. They did have to obviously change some things for that because that is
they're full remakes for the so. And they're pretty solid remakes. They change a few things from the original games. I think they change a few things mostly for the better. But you know, it's let's be real. Like most people don't have access to playing the original versions of either Another Code game, so that's what they got, and it's a good option for people. That's how much of a perfect fit I am. Not to just say, but like I actually imported Another Code R and played it because I liked the trace memory so much. So,
Sing also developed Hotel Dusk, Room 215 for the DS as well. But they've made a whole bunch of games, but they only lasted till like 2010 when they were like in debt by like 256 million yen, according to Wikipedia, and they filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah, Another Code and Hotel Dusk did not sell well, sadly. I loved those games, but they clearly were pretty good sized productions for such a small team, and they just weren't big hitters, even though they should have been. So
now, I have a question for you, Derek, about Sing specifically, but in relation to Another Code, trace memory. Anyway, Wikipedia lists Sing as an independent video game developer. So that means does that mean that Trace Memory is an indie game for the DS?
Well, so that's, we're having such a fun conversation these days about what counts as independent. I would say it's difficult because all of Sing's biggest titles, right? Both Another Code games and then both of the Kyle Hyde games, Hotel Dusk and then Last Window, are Nintendo published, if I remember correctly, across the board. That's not just like an in one region kind of thing. You know what? Yes, because that's why Another Code R never made it over here. Nintendo of America was really weird about some Wii titles. So a lot of these games like Xenoblade and Disaster Day of Crisis and The Last Story and a couple of these other games made it to Europe and then took years, if ever, to actually come to the US. But I digress.
I mean,
I don't know.
They had games published by other people. They had Glass Rose for the PS2 published by Capcom. They had Monster Rancher DS published by Tecmo. Apparently, there's it's like a life simulation game. Little King's Story from Marvelous was rated pretty highly. Did it come out? It came out in North
Little
America.
King's Story
well.
was a big. That was a WiiWare game, I think, right? Like a downloadable title for the Wii, if I remember right. But yeah, like that was a pretty good size. That was really, really beloved and well received, and still has its shooters today. But I think this is fun because it gets into like this has been a big conversation, especially in recent years, about what counts as indie, right? Like Expedition 33 is an independent studio, and it's also a massive studio that put a massive amount of money into. So like, do we want to count that as indie versus not to plug something that just came out, but like Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era is made on a tiny independent team, but it's a classic license that is currently owned and published by Ubisoft. So like, I think indie has some people judge it by the size of the release, some by the size of the team, some by how far are you away from a big publisher.
Some I would even say describe it as like the how big the game is itself. Like what are you putting on the screen? Are the visuals AAA quality or not? Like I feel like I'm not saying that's a defining characteristic of a AAA game. I just know like it. Unfortunately, the definition is a vibe. The definition of indie game is just vibes. Because I even think back like
Vampire Survivor is one of the biggest games ever, right? And like it sold it made more money than the Vatican. It's clearly an indie game, and then Vampire Crawlers comes out and people are hesitant to call it an indie game, and it's like why? It's the same little team doing the same thing. It's a cheap little, it's just that you know that these people will make a big game and make a ton of money off of it, but
and it's like
it's Team Cherry indie.
And the same thing with that game company that did Journey and Flower. Those were all funded by Sony, but made by an indie team, and they are considered indie darlings. So it's like, anyway, this is a conversation for a full episode as like breaking down what makes an indie game an indie game. And I don't think we're ever going to get to an answer to that. The last thing that I have though on kind of some of the stuff with Sing Entertainment and Rika Suzuki, the reason I was also saying she has been around for a while and has done some shit. She worked on the original Dragon Quest games as an assistant with Enix, with Yuji Horii and whatnot. On Wikipedia, she's credited as assistant. I'd have to see specifically what she did. I don't know what, but she has a credit according to Wikipedia. That's
when
crazy.
You have NES era Dragon Quest in your resume, I don't really care if you were an intern who got coffee. Like you get your flowers, in my opinion, you know? And she was certainly doing more than that, because let's be clear, this industry historically has really downplayed the roles of most women who were there from the beginning. I mean, I'm one of Capcom's biggest shooters, right? Capcom's one of my favorite big gaming companies of all of gaming history. And there's so many stories about like the way women were erased from Street Fighter 2, right? And their role in the game. So like, you know, maybe she's listed as assistant, but I wouldn't be shocked to find out that she was punching above that title's weight class. I
mean, she's been in the industry for 30 years at this point. She has a game coming out soon or came out recently. I'm going to have to double check on that. But yeah, it's just crazy, man. It like, when I looked up her stuff, I was like, oh, she has a credit on, like she has a page for IMDb, so she must be notable. And I saw it, I went, holy shit, she's very notable. Yeah, she has a game called Dark Auction that just came out this year on PS5, Switch, and Windows, and it'll be coming out on Switch 2 later this year. And it's a adventure visual novel developed by Izanagi Games. Very anime looking. Looks like the cover art looks fucking cool.
Love me a good VN. I'm here for it.
It got some decent
maybe
scores.
One for me to add to my to-do list.
It got some decent scores on Famitsu. I'm trying to think because they do that, the 4 different grades. Like, so it's 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, and an 8 out of 10. So basically, it got an 8 out of 10, or whatever the equivalent of that. That's not bad. Anyway, the last little bit of fun facts that I have for research when I was doing, some research on this, the game began in development in 2004. The lead writer and designer, like I said before, was Rika Suzuki, who's been in the industry for a long time. And the last fun fact I have here about the localization. So, actually, sorry, one other quick thing. Ashley, the main character of the game, was originally going to be like 16 or 18, but Rika aged her down. She thought that would make more sense for the story, which I think actually was a smart choice. I feel like making her a little more vulnerable, like a 14-year-old, makes the story a little bit more compelling. But so the localization changes. Ann Lin from Nintendo of America was the localizer, or worked on the localization of this game. And I have a quote from her because she made some decent changes to the original Japanese version, because apparently in the original Japanese version, Ashley just accepts all the stuff that happens to her, like, without hesitation. The stuff, I don't want to spoil too much because we're going to get to a spoiler wall section in a little bit, but she just accepts it, and I think smartly Anne was like, that's unrealistic, and changed that in the American version. And the quote is, I think that a believable character,
I think that's what makes the character for me.
Yeah, like the fact that she's like not just buying everything that she sold, or buying everything that's being sold to her. She's kind of a
stubborn 14-year-old. It fits the vibe, like.
That's another topic for conversation, because there's a bunch of people who are like, I don't like localization, they're changing things. And I'm like, there's a reason why not everything makes sense in different cultures and different cultural contexts. Like, that's why you have a localization team. I mean,
it's also just flat out like it's a fetishization of anything Japanese, that it must be better. The voice acting must be better. The writing must be better because it comes from my glorious Nippon. I mean, it's just weeaboo shit. And I say this as somebody who's grown up, loving Japanese games. Like, I've been watching anime for God knows how long. Like, I'm weeb trash myself, but like people have got to get over being so fucking precious about the idea that nothing can be improved upon. Editors exist. Even the original writers of all of your favorite games, shows, whatever, in their original form, you're not getting the original artist's intent because they are going through layers of editors, layers of other, people, making suggestions. Like, everything in gaming especially is a collaborative work. So I just have no attachment to the concept of like the purity of the idea.
What matters is, like, I think, well, in a weird sense, I have no attachment to the purity of the script. I have attachment to the purity of the idea, because like, if whatever the intention was by the original developer, then I want that in there, but I don't need it verbatim. And perfect example, I had a guest on a couple years ago. I've told the story before, so I apologize to listeners who've heard this before. But Derek, I know you haven't, and anyone else listening.
Maybe they're just tuning in because they love this game and they didn't catch this episode. So.
I interviewed Jeremy Blaustein a few years ago. Jeremy Blaustein is a localizer who did Symphony of the Night, Metal Gear Solid. Like, the guy's been in the industry. His sister, rest in peace, was the voice of the original Meowth in Pokemon, and he worked as like the Pokemon anime.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And he worked on localization for the Pokemon cartoon. And there was an example he gave, which I haven't watched a ton of the Pokemon cartoon past the original series, so I don't know a lot of the characters. But apparently Professor Oak has a brother, and he tells a lot of like pun-based jokes in the series, and they're like very punny. And what he was talking about, there was like, I might be misremembering. I'm bringing a story up from recollection from a few years ago, but the joke was that he was making a pun off of Pikachu, and instead of Pikachu, he said Pimanchu, which apparently means like steak. So instead of Pikachu, it's like steak chew, right? That's the joke. That works in Japanese because Pikachu, Pimanchu is a pun in Japanese. Steak chew isn't a pun in English. It doesn't work as a pun in English. So you can't. So to all the people who are like, oh, you have to do it verbatim. It has to be the exact translation 1-to-1. What would you do with that? Do you ruin the joke that the writers clearly intended to be in there? Or do you localize it and find a way to make it work for whichever demographic, whichever territory you are releasing the anime in? And the funny story for that is that Jeremy went to his director of it or whatever, and he said, hey, this joke won't work in English. What do you want me to localize this as? And the guy's like, just shut up and translate. I'm paraphrasing it, but he essentially told Jeremy to shut up and translate. And then Jeremy goes, and then I got mad, and that's how I lost my job at Pokemon.
There was a great era of, especially like late 90s into the early 2000s, where a lot of localizers were, and I know we're so off topic, but like,
no,
still,
it's fine.
No, because we'll wrap it back around.
Yeah, we will.
But where a lot of localizers were going, this joke does not translate. What if instead of trying to find an American version of this joke, what if we instead took the idea that this scene is jokey and we just worked from that? And I think that gave us some of the most brilliant, like some of the actually funniest jokes of that era in games and in movies and in television. I will forever point out the original Digimon movie as having just an absolutely actually, honestly, the original Digimon show as well, and the first Pokemon movie have a lot of jokes in them that are not translation. You know, Ash saying Vikings are mostly found in Minnesota is not a joke that is a translation of something from Japanese. It's them going, we need a joke here, punch it up. What do we got? And it's great. And like, it's a different approach, but it's every bit as valid because it keeps the energy of we're trying to make this thing kind of funny in this moment. Yeah. But like, I talk about purity of the idea, and like, I can think of plenty of times where I've written something or I've made something and the person who's responsible for editing me pulled something better out of what I did or made suggestions where like, you need to edit here. And it actually brought me to something better than, like, closer to what I actually wanted than what I first put out. Today is May the 4th, right? It's Star Wars Day. It's famously known that George Lucas was at his best in that original trilogy when there were people to kind of edit him and help focus him in on and tell him no. And his best work came out under those circumstances. So like, yeah, I mean, when we talk about localization, when we talk about, to me, it's very much the same conversation as like editing. Sometimes you do have to do a little editing to get the best version of something, or just a slightly different version of something that works just as well and conveys the same story and emotional meaning.
And that is exactly what Ann Lin from Nintendo of America did when she was localizing Trace Memory. There we go. See, we brought that back. That was a perfect.
The Treehouse
segment.
Folks at Nintendo are so good at this stuff. They were, and they're all just lovely people, by the way. I actually used to work at NOA, and I mean, the Treehouse Folks are genuinely so passionate about their work and so thoughtful and intellectual about how they make these sort of translation choices. So again, for chuds on the internet to get mad at dialogue changes in a Fire Emblem game, it's like, you don't know how many professionals and artists went into thinking about why they're doing what they're doing.
It's not
Trace Memory, I think. Yeah, I think that the changes to Ashley that I wasn't even aware these were changes. I thought this is just how she was written. But like, it is also a character archetype that maybe makes more sense and feels more familiar to Americans than it does to Japanese people, because like culturally, like our teenagers are very different. The societies we grow up in and are socialized in are very different. And that kind of obstinance that Ashley displays is if I stop and think about it, kind of a more American teenager trait, you know, in terms of how we are socialized and how we are kind of allowed to be. Which gets into a whole interesting conversation given Ashley is biracial. So
is she biracial? I guess so.
Yeah. The dad's white and the mom is Japanese.
That's right. Yeah.
She's Ashley Mizuki Robbins. Yeah.
Yeah.
The DS version does not make it as clear as the Switch version. Having slightly updated designs, it's a little bit easier to see and make out. But yeah. Don't ask where the white hair comes from, but
but no, so that's all the fun facts I really had for the behind the scenes for the game. Like there's other stuff that I found, you know, where it's like, oh, a lot of the developer stuff that I always find, it's like, well, we had this idea and then we decided to switch it to this. And I'm like, okay, like I don't know, that's not that engaging. So I try to find the things that to me were at least the most interesting.
Just every game ever, right? Like,
yeah. Like that's like, all right, the same thing you told me, like every dev has said. But yeah, so why don't we get into the like what either story setting or not story setting, I'm sorry, gameplay, music, or visuals. We'll start off with gameplay just so people know how this game actually plays. So for those who have not played this game, the basic setup of this game, and you know what, I will read it directly from the back of the box so that way there's no accidental spoilers, because I haven't
seen that box in a long time.
I know, right? Blood Edward Island awaits. 10 years after her parents' presumed deaths, Ashley Robbins receives a package, supposedly sent by her father, that contains a small device. Tracing it to deserted Blood Edward Island, she sets out to discover what really happened all those years ago. Follow Ashley as she explores the island's depths, solves puzzles, searches for clues, and uncovers the truth of her parents' fates. So that is the setup. That's all you really need to know. She's going to this island because her parents have been presumed missing, and she gets a letter from her dad, and there's a weird device called a DTS, which is actually it's a Nintendo DS. It's the original clamshell. Well, I mean, I guess they're all clamshells, but the original chunky DS model. But every time I saw the acronym DTS, I kept thinking it was so close to DTF, and I'm like, well, this just is weird. But then I thought DTS, does that mean down to sex? Like that? Either way, it doesn't work. But
it's funny because in the remake, it's very clearly a Nintendo Switch in the way that Nintendo so frequently updates these kinds of things in their games when they remake them.
That's really cool. So the gameplay though it's a point and click adventure sort of. I actually kind of found the visual language of it a little refreshing for it, because a lot of times point and click adventures, they are static screens that you have to click around on, and then you have to click on certain locations to move to the next screen. And it's top down and 3D in those, like, I'll be honest, it's very nostalgic for me, but awful at Nintendo 3D Nintendo DS graphics. I kind of love Nintendo DS 3D, even though it looks interesting.
It's chunky, it's crunchy, it's very low res, very low detail, but it's an aesthetic. Because here's the thing: by this time, right, especially Nintendo, I think was generally way more successful at this than Sony was at their own efforts on the PSP. But like at this point, graphics artists like knew how to work within the limitations of the original 3D consoles, you know, things like the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1, and how to create illusions of detail with low polygons, you know, with like get the most out of low res textures. And I think that a lot of 3D games on the DS actually, to me, have a lot of the energy of like a lot of modern indie games that very intentionally go for super low detail poly styles. You know, it's to me an example of good craftsmanship working within extremely tight limitations. Yeah. And I'm with you that I like that it's a top-down real time, not a static image you're clicking around. Not that I don't love those games, but I think it created like the feeling of exploring the island, exploring the mansion. It gave you a better feeling of the actual geography of the location. Like you were actually mapping out the inside of this house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%, because it's like when you have the static images and you have to move around the map, or move around on a point and click adventure, it can be hard, like you said, to understand the geography of the location you're in. It's not hard. It's very clear. And also, I think it makes you, how can I put this? It's weird to describe movement in a point and click adventure game as like responsive, but like it is, because normally point and click adventure games are very static. I've said it a whole bunch of times, but it's stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. This gives you the illusion of being able to do lots of different things. Like you feel like you're moving a lot more. You have a lot more control over your character. You have control over Ashley, because you can go anywhere. And I thought it was really smart how they did it, where like depending on the screen, like depending on the area of the 3D map you're in, determine like that you would see the top screen on the DS change, because I think it was on the bottom screen was where you were looking at, or maybe vice versa. I suddenly can't remember. You know what? I'll look up a long play while we're talking just to make sure I'm not completely wrong with that. But
yeah, I'm suddenly struggling to remember.
Whichever one was not did not have the 3D top down thing, the other one would show like the 2D screen, the static 2D screen that I mentioned before. And that was really cool because it was the bottom screen that had the 3D. That's right. And that was really cool because then it showed you specifically which screens you could actually search for with the point and click mechanic. You would essentially run around, you would see a magnifying glass in the top right corner, and if that button was clickable, because it wasn't always clickable, then you could tap it, and then what you saw on the top screen would move down to the bottom, and then you could tap around on the screen to do the point and click adventure part of the game. And so that's literally all the mechanics in the game, other than like solving puzzle stuff here and there. There really isn't much. And looking in your backpack, and you can take pictures as well to help for you to remember things later on that you can use as reference, which is used for some puzzles, and it's extremely helpful for remembering things as well. But I really like this presentation because point and click adventures, I think, something that's overwhelming to new players to it, and I include myself in that, is that there's too much to click on, and you don't know what's worth clicking on and what's not. And especially in like older games, you really need to click on everything, because those games are not, they're very unfair and unforgiving. This game is extremely fair, I would say, and it makes it a really good approachable entry for people who want to get into point and click adventures. I actually would recommend this game because it's bare bones. The puzzles aren't that difficult, but they're also not that easy. It's got like a really good mixture of the two. But that's just kind of my thoughts on that's a description of the gameplay and my overall thoughts. Derek, I want to throw it over to you though. What are your thoughts on all this?
I'm kind of inclined to agree with you, right? Like, I already kind of mentioned that I like the perspective shift to it being like a top down, actually moving around the room. The getting the like both perspectives is kind of neat. But also like, I do think that it in a way that's very similar to, Phoenix Wright. The first Phoenix Wright was coming to the West around the same time, if it hadn't already. And Phoenix Wright is a great example of something that could be a little overwhelming in the sheer number of things you can click on, the sheer number of combinations of this evidence to this person, but then trace memory. It's much more clear that there are far fewer specific things to interact with. And there's still plenty of things you can interact with and just get flavor text, but it's broadly much more clear from its visual design, from how they place and highlight certain parts of what you're looking at, to be like, these are the things that are important, And it's consistent about that. It never hides details off in like a low detail corner off in the background. It puts the focus on the things you are supposed to be checking, which makes it a lot less trial and error to proceed. I think that, like you said, does make it a lot more approachable than the adventure games of old. And it's funny because this way of intelligent framing of specific objects in the chaos is something that you would see Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, get better at game over game, right? To the point where it became much, much easier to be much more clear, even though that is set up once again to be visual clutter nightmare, infinite possibilities of interactions. The correct path is much more clear. And it's just because of the kind of like visual design and scenario design, like providing clarity in the way that trace memory was already doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think
so. I mean, it's a long way to just agree with what you're saying, basically.
No, but you bring up a point I hadn't thought of, in that like this game and Phoenix Wright in extension by that, even though we know it's a different developer, but like you cannot progress in this game unless you have everything you need in order to progress. It's not like old point and click adventure games where like you could be super far in the game and find out that there was an item you needed like 4 hours prior, and oh whoops, you can't get that item again. You've already passed that section of the game, and you've now soft locked yourself. Excuse me. They don't have like this, as well as LucasArts is famous for kind of starting that trend, but like this is like an even more distilled version of that, where like there's some extra stuff in this game that if you don't find absolutely everything, you can't get the best possible ending. But at least from what I was reading online,
I forgot there were multiple endings. Wow, yeah, that's right, there were.
I don't know what the other endings are. I think
it's just a good and a bad ending. I don't think there's like a bunch of different ones. It's just like did you do stuff right enough to get the good ending or the bad ending?
Well, there's a character that you meet, which we will keep spoiler free for now, that if you find everything, then that character, can live in peace, and if you don't, then they don't. It's not like they live in abject horror either. At least that's what I'm understanding it would be. But yeah,
it's more of like a bittersweet, slightly melancholy ending than like a truly bad ending. Like Ashley's side of the story mostly gets resolved the same way either way. It's basically about how this kind of primary supporting character, whether or not they get closure or not, is the way I remember it. Again, to avoid spoiling anything.
Yeah. And I think also, like, there's not much more to talk about in terms of the gameplay, but in terms of the visuals, we've already touched on it a little bit. I just got to compliment them again, man. Like, I think all the static images are really cool. The character designs are really good. All of the character designs are interesting and fun to look at.
It's so visually unique. Yeah. I love the art style. I love this slightly painterly aesthetic that's teamed up with like a very distinctly Japanese art style and character design, but in a way that is not at all reminiscent of like anime necessarily, which is sometimes a thing that people unfortunately conflate. And I think it's very refreshing to have, again, this is just a very unique looking game. And I think it's gorgeous. And it, to me, alongside kind of its companion game, Hotel Dusk, were kind of helped me feel like this moment in time early in the DS's life cycle when it's like, man, the future of video games can really look like anything if we want them to. In a way that's so antithetical to this long stretch of gaming history in more recent years where it's been the chase towards realism above all else. But it feels like we're breaking back out of a little bit better where we're embracing, huge swings in art, again, largely driven by indies. But yeah, just this game's gorgeous to look at. And its sound design is very ponderous, right? Like the choice of sound effects, not just things like footstep sounds, but the sound effects that like cue you into there's a mystery in this room that you haven't solved yet, or you've solved this puzzle. It's lightly sci-fi, but it's mostly like a little bit dreamlike and it's just very interesting to even listen to.
That's a really good.
It's hard to explain that part in words.
It's very ambient, I would say. Like,
yes, that's a great way to put it.
Very ambient, and sometimes I miss when games have strong melody hooks, but like this, like I couldn't tell you much about the soundtrack because it's ambient. That's kind of like where I really wish I had
a single track from it, but it built the atmosphere necessary at every moment. Like it's a very atmospheric game for being a Nintendo DS game. It utilizes what it's giving you. You know, the kind of sterilized aesthetic of the mansion, even the island, you know, it's Blood Edward Island, right? Like it almost sounds like this should be a survival horror experience, but it's this beautiful, pristine island and these beautiful gardens and this, you know, beautifully kept, but oddly empty, you know, classical mansion. It is beautiful, but sterile. And the ambience helps build. This could be a scary location if the music was different. But it leans into the mystery of it rather than the fear of it. And I think that's really important for the tone they're trying to get, because they clearly don't want this to be a horror game.
I would say, and I mean this as a compliment, it kind of is Scooby-Doo vibes without the comedy. Like Scooby-Doo is clearly like horror comedy, like horror mystery comedy. This is more like mystery with a smidge of horror. By horror just because it's like what's happening here. It's like the fear of the unknown. You don't see anything horrific.
There are some very light horror elements, right? Yeah. You know, I mean, very light. There's stuff that could be horrifying in different contexts, could be scary in different contexts, but it keeps it framed as mystery rather than scary.
And I will give the game credit to, without spoiling anything, we'll get to the spoiler wall in just a moment. The mystery had me guessing most of the way. Like my first time playing it was like this time. I also proudly say I'm a little dense because it makes it much more enjoyable for me for games, because I don't always see the foreshadowing. Sometimes I see foreshadowing, but a lot of times I don't see it coming at all. There was a couple moments by the end of the game, like, okay, I see. Once all the characters were introduced, I was able to tell immediately who the bad guy of the game was, who, like, where the twist was going to come. That was disappointing, but once again, this is a game. It's meant to be an entry point, and I don't use this derogatorily. I do think it is meant for a younger age group, and I think that's good, because you need games that are geared towards younger age groups to bring them into the more advanced, the more challenging ones of whichever genre. Doesn't matter what game genre it is, any genre. But like, sometimes there's just a weird like elitist thing where people are like, oh, this is meant for kids, and you know, it's I want something that's for adults. I'm like, okay, then we'll go find that. Like, if you want your whatever thing you are into, whatever hobby, whatever you're into, you need something for younger generations to also become engaged with that. Because if you don't, the hobby dies. Look at model train collecting. No, there's no young people in that collecting sphere.
Yeah. I think sometimes we mistake the degree of complexity necessary to get into something with the complexity or depth of its ideas. This is like a big I've been on this podium for ages, right? Like I grew up on a lot of children's and family media that touched on really, really heavy subject material and was very emotionally challenging, right? Like there's not a kid in our age generation, I'm guessing we're probably in the same general age cohort, who didn't like cry when Mufasa died in The Lion King. Yes. You know what Spoiler I mean? Alert. But like, and that's, yeah, I know, right? But like, I think that movie is very straightforward to follow who the good and bad guy is. It's not a complex story, but there is emotional complexity, right? Like, so it's, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't believe in the elitism. I think that even as an adult, you can go back to something that is to good media that is meant for all ages or even aimed at a younger audience. Go back and read Animorphs again sometime, right? You'll find out. But like Trace Memory is a game that it very clearly wants you to have pieced things together before the game tells you the answer. It wants you to be piecing together the connections in this family and have some idea of what happened and what went wrong before the big reveal comes. It's not trying to give you the Knives Out, you know what I mean? The double triple twist where you hit the end and you're like, yeah, where you're like, I theoretically could have put this together, but don't have the PhD it takes to have put this together.
Yeah.
This wants you to have it put together by the time it confirms the thing you have. And yes, that's great for like younger audiences getting into mysteries for the first time because it is easier for them to take those puzzle pieces and snap them together. But like, that's not a bad thing. And in the process, it's still giving a story that is like, it's giving you an experience and a story that are very artistically rich, if you ask me, you know?
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%.
Like, this is not kid content slop. This is art, you know? This is something that should be analyzed and should be broken down.
And in all honesty, like with the subject matter, I mean, you can tell there has something to do with memories. The name is Trace Memory. Like they put it on Front Street for the title, but tweens, like I remember being like a tween and like this type of shit I would eat up, be like, oh, I'm so deep, I'm playing a game and it's dealing with all these like philosophical quandaries and whatever. Like as an adult, I understand these are things that are much more tried and true, things that we've seen a bunch of times before. But when you're a tween playing this for the first time, it might be your first time experiencing these types of tropes. And when like, you know, when you're first experiencing different tropes, that's like one of your favorite, like what I'm trying to think of like a good example of something like that. Like, that for me as a kid, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Like Final Fantasy VII was like that for me. Like when I first played that, like that blew
was for
my
a lot
mind.
of people. Yeah.
And now I go back and play it and I still love that game. I think it's deeper than this in terms of its themes, but still like there are like, when you play games like this is like fodder for a developing brain to like, oh, this is the type of stuff I'm into, like this type of like mystery, that kind of thing. So
just as an aside, but continuing this for a thread for a little bit. Are you a parent yet? Want to be a parent? Anything like that?
I'm a parent. Yeah.
Okay. So I've not yet been lucky enough for that to happen. But me and my wife both love when we experience certain things that are, you know, family or all ages kind of content or maybe specifically aimed at younger audiences. One of my favorite things to do when, you know, watching, reading, playing something like that is thinking about what this could mean to my kid down the road when I have one. Right. Both what this could have meant to me when I was a kid and what it could mean to them. A great example is being like something like Steven Universe, right? Which is like definitely aimed for a younger cohort than me. But like, I love to think about what this could mean to sharing this with a child down the road. And I think that's an example of the kind of like multi-layered how we approach media that, I mean, like people should have. I want people to think more deeply about me. That's what Castle Bravo is me going back to movies about men stomping around in rubber suits and saying like, what can we find and pull deeper from this art? But like Trace Memory is a great game to go back to. I've not played the DS version in a long time. The most recent version I played would have been the remakes. And it was fun to play the remakes where I've probably aged out of the original demographic a little bit, but still found a lot of joy in them. And it was fun to look at it as like, how did this change from the original? But I was also thinking like, if I gave this to a 12 or 14-year-old, you know, son or daughter or, you know, child that I had, what would they be pulling from this? And I think that's a very fun artistic exercise in its own right.
No, I agree 100% with that. And it's funny, like thinking of kids media that like can be appreciated by all ages. I'm going to mention this and get off it quickly because otherwise I will go on a tangent because I love this so dearly. Have you watched Bluey?
A couple episodes, yes.
Okay.
I've not sat down and like watched, but like I have a dear friend with a young child, and like we've watched it together when hanging out and doing other things, especially when it's like, all right, it's not time for the kid to go to bed yet. Like, yeah, let's put on a couple episodes of Bluey. Bluey's great at this.
Yes, Bluey is exceptionally good at this. Bluey is very layered with a lot of heavy themes in some of the episodes. But anyway, I got to get off that because I'm actually going to be doing another Bluey episode at some point because there's another Bluey game that is technically already out on mobile, but I don't want to play it on mobile. I'm waiting for the Switch port later this year. So that's coming down the pipe later. I don't have much more to add for the gameplay and visuals and music. We've kind of touched on all three of these over the course of the conversation. Before we move on to the story segment and the spoiler wall, is there any other final thoughts on, the music, the gameplay, and the visuals, Derek, that you want to talk about before we move on?
No, I think we've kind of sold and explained well, like what the game is from a non-narrative perspective, but also sold the energy of the narrative. It's kind of hard to get much farther without getting into some of those details.
Yep. That's kind of I appreciate talking about the vibes of it because I think that's a lot of what makes the game so interesting. It's not just the story and the gameplay, it's that they do a good job of marrying that like creepy atmosphere. But all right. Yeah. Let's move on to the story segment. Listeners, this is the spoiler wall. So if you do not want to get the story of this game spoiled, which I highly recommend you don't, not because it's anything like, I guess as a little review of it, it's not groundbreaking, but it's good. It's solid. Like I don't use I don't call it not groundbreaking in a bad way. I consider it like almost this is something you've seen before, but this does it competently. And I think it's still worth going into it without knowing what it's doing prior to that. So this is the spoiler wall, just officially declaring it. The basic outline of the story, as we've said before, you play as Ashley Mizuki Robbins. She is the daughter of her parents, who are presumed dead, Richard and Sayoko Robbins, who you find out later are scientists, and we'll find out who they're, like what they research in a little bit. But she was looked after by her father's younger sister, Jessica Robbins, apparently in the suburbs of Seattle. I did not know she grew up in Seattle. But she has this reoccurring nightmare that she keeps suffering from, in which she's hiding in a closet and witnesses someone getting shot. I wonder who that could be. And then 11 years later, I'm also reading this off the Wikipedia just for those listeners. I'm paraphrasing a little bit here and there, but it's more succinct than having me memorize everything. She receives a package from her father, who she thought was dead, a couple days prior to her 14th birthday. And in her birthday, in the package, there's this thing called the DAS. Well, it says on Wikipedia DAS. I could have sworn it was a DTS in the game. Maybe I'm misremembering, but and it is programmed to only respond to Ashley's biometrics, which contains a message from her father claiming that he is waiting for her on Blood Edward Island, an island located off the coast of Washington. So she goes there with her aunt Jessica, and that's when she finds out from her aunt that her dad, surprise, is actually still alive. Her aunt confirms it to her, I'm pretty sure, on the boat ride over, and justifiably so. She is pissed because she was raised for 11 years to think that her dad was just missing or dead, and only to find out that her aunt the whole time, her caretaker, her caregiver, the person she trusts the most, has lied to her, and her dad's been alive for these 11 years. And like, how would you feel in that situation? Like, I love how this game tries to explore it in a very kid-friendly way, where it's like the sense of betrayal and all. It's great. There's actually when I was talking about Ann Lin from Nintendo of America saying she made changes, her quote kind of about this whole thing was, I think that a believable character, a believable person would have certain feelings of betrayal, not just acceptance. I wanted to explore that just a little. I think the Japanese text was a little more accepting, not really questioning the weirdness. Oh, there's a spoiler coming up of meeting the strange person we're going to meet in a little bit, or any of the strange circumstances that had befallen her. So that's what she's talking about. And apparently in the Japanese version, she's just like, okay, my dad's alive. Cool, bro.
Yeah, and
that's
again,
great.
I find it so much more both compelling and realistic. Not that realism is the thing you should necessarily strive for, but like I do also separately find it more compelling that Ashley is so frustrated when she learns all of this. It's like, you've known all. Like, I thought my dad was probably dead, and he's just been here on an island. Like, what are the emotional repercussions of that for me? Both in terms of like, does he not love me? Like, what's been going on? What does this say about how he feels like about my concept of family? What does that say about you, Aunt Jessica, that you knew and kept this from me, and I trusted you and depended on you? And it does a really good job in not a ton of lines of dialogue of expressing Ashley's like shock and her kind of sullen reaction to it's not necessarily outrage. She shuts down is how she tends to handle things a little bit. She gets frustrated and angry and kind of sulks, which again, I find so much more realistic as a depiction of what an upset and emotionally complicated 14-year-old is going to do. They're not going to, they aren't going to blow up all the time. They're mostly just going to shut down and be quiet, or stop engaging with you the way you want them to.
And like, as someone who, when confronted with a lot of anger and like shock about something, I do the same as Ashley. I shut down, because at least for me, like, when I'm angry at someone, if there's conflict, I get very quiet. I don't like to yell. I don't like argument. I don't like yelling. I don't like screaming matches. None of that stuff. I shut down. Wait. I tell the person, like, I am very mad right now. I will come back later. And so they, like, I don't want to deal with the yelling part, but I still want to address the conflict. And I feel like Ashley, through in a teenager way, she shuts down mainly because she doesn't know what to do. Like, that's understandably so. That's a shocking amount of information, and just even if it's not the amount, the information itself, the content of that information is just shocking. So I like her portrayal. I like the way she's written throughout the game, because every time something else comes up, she's just kind of like, what the fuck, man? Like, this now too? There's a lot of weird stuff that happens to her. Because they get to the island, Jessica goes, like, her dad was supposed to meet them there on the dock, and he doesn't show up. So Jessica goes to find him, and then she doesn't show up. She's gone. So you as a player now are wondering, like, what the hell's going on? Like, what's going on here? And you start exploring around the island. You talk to the boat, the captain of the boat, and he says, yeah, I wouldn't, like, this island, like, I'm not getting off the boat. Like, this island's cursed. I'm never going on it. Like, so the game is really layering it on through, like, mystery after mystery after mystery. Like, something's up with this island. My dad's alive now. That's weird. Oh, but he's not here, even though he said he would be. That's like 2 mysteries right there. And now my aunt's gone as well. So they've layered like 4 mysteries in the span of the first like 20 minutes of the game for you to unravel and pull apart as the game goes on. From here, though, she explores the island and she meets someone a little unordinary. Derek, why don't you talk a little bit about like who Ashley meets on the island, a new friend of hers?
Yeah. So, leaving the boat captain, leaving her aunt, not finding her father where she thought she was going to, and beginning to explore the mansion. If I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember if they actually meet in the graveyard or if it's just before. But she befriends a ghost, clearly a ghost named D. It's not exactly a it's a thing that they don't reveal right away, but it's also like very clearly true that D is a ghost. I'm trying to remember how he's even portrayed.
He's a
in
ghost.
the original version of the game.
He's fully a ghost in the original.
He's a Casper boy, like, right?
Yeah,
like when I know in the Switch version, it's like he is a floating, transparent blue guy with no feet. You know,
it's the same in the DS version. He's got a weird zigzaggy tail that follow, like you see it from the top down, tail. And a little ghost tail. Yeah, very very Casper-ish.
So he's a young boy. My read was always, I don't remember if they ever confirm his age, but my read was always that he's younger than Ashley even. But you meet D, and D doesn't remember anything about who he is, about the history of the island. He doesn't know how he died. He may not even be aware that he died. You know, I think it's just like, hey, this is real weird, and I need help kind of figuring out what's going on with me. And Ashley obviously needs help trying to find her dad, and they get kind of tied up in the same like mystery, which is like exploring this mansion and exploring like and learning about the history of the family that lived there. You know, through like solving puzzles and getting to new rooms and meeting, you know, one of a very small handful of characters in the game, and just kind of, you know, you are learning through your exploration what it is that all the members of this family, what happened to them, which members may be surviving today, you know, the supposed curse of the island and of the family. And obviously it will not take, you know, starry-eyed players a lot of insight to put together that D is himself a member of this family, especially as he begins having specific memories of his friend Franny, who is, you know, one of the like the grandchildren of the family tree that we're kind of exploring, and clearly his cousin, you know, but yeah, it puts the search for Ashley's aunt and Ashley's father, and this mysterious character Bill, who starts showing up, kind of intertwined with the story of the family, and the story of this mysterious device that Ashley has and only Ashley can activate. So,
you do find out that like so. I don't know how exactly to approach, because because you explore through the mansion, and you learn, like you were saying, like both more about Ashley's past as well as Dee's past. Most of the stuff you learn in the mansion is about Dee's past, which makes sense because it's his family's mansion. That's where most of the history is. But by doing so, you learn kind of by proxy more about Ashley's past and what's going on with her dad. And the basic thing is that D was the son of, so from what I remember, it's been a week or two since I finished it. From what I remember, the dude who owns the island, the Jeff Bezos joke I made, or whatever rich guy owned the island, he had sons a while ago, but did not really he was not a good dad to them. And so he decides to adopt his grandsons, I believe, and he treats them like his real sons. And he learns from his previous mistakes, you know, props to him for like realizing I was a shitty dad last time. I'm going to do it right this time. Because both of his sons, I believe, went to war, and then one of them came back with like PTSD, another one, it was brutal. And so he is taking care of his grandsons. They grow up, they get married, have their own kids. The kid of one of his sons you find out is D.
I'm looking this family tree up because I need to look at it to remember.
It's a lot. And then basically you find out the two brothers in front of me, the two brothers, after they kind of reconvene when their grandfather, aka their dad, dies, and they're trying to figure out who is getting what. And it turns out that one of them is getting like nothing, and the other one is getting, I think, the island or the mansion in the island or something like that. And they have a fight over it. And what happens is Dee's dad is the one who is mad and tries to kill his brother for whatever is in the will. And Dee is hiding in the closet, similar to Ashley, or he's in the room, I should say, similar to Ashley. So that's the parallel. Oh, I should have spoiled that. What's going on with Ashley? Whatever. We'll get to that in just a moment.
I mean, I think you also put together pretty early that like Ashley's little traces of memory that she's having,
yes,
are her witnessing her mother's murder, because the idea is that her father may or may not have been the person that she witnessed shooting her mother, which is a thing that won't get cleared up until towards the end of the game.
Yes. And so Dee's father tries to kill his own brother for this, what's in the will. The brother kills him in self-defense. And you find out is genuinely like he's bereft. He did not want this. Like he harbored no ill will against his brother or Dee. Dee, also bereft, runs away because he thinks his uncle's going to kill him, and his uncle's chasing after him like, no, I'm not going to hurt you, this and that. And Dee falls, he goes into the cave and falls down a cliff and dies pretty much. And so he doesn't remember what happened to him, so he's left wandering the island until Ashley can see him, and he's surprised, like, you can see me? No one else can see me. And they do the whole thing where like kids can see them because their minds aren't closed yet, and adults' minds are not open anymore. Very kind of like, I've heard that type of trope before.
It's kind of implicated. If I remember right. It's been a while that like the old boat captain can see the ghosts.
Yes, I believe so.
But like the old boat captain is also kind of intimated to be like a much warmer and more like aware like presence than he's originally made out to be. You know, he's not just a certain old, like it's to me that's a moment that's not like a what's so important about the boat, you know, captain. I think it's just like everybody has such a rich interior life and you have no idea, you know, what's going on. He's the protagonist of his own story in a way. But yeah, like through, you know, going through the story and learning about the family, of course, like Franny, who's brought up over and over again, turns out to be the other brother's child. So it's Dee's cousin. Daniel, we will come to learn. Obviously, it's a D name. There's not a lot of options for it to be in the family tree. But this kind of wraps up then and kind of ties the two stories together through this character of Bill, who is very obviously the bad guy of the story. Like from the moment you meet him, you can tell.
He sounds like he only pretends to be Ashley's father for the first part of the game.
Yeah, it's not even close to being like a realistic. Yeah, like you can, you know, he's the bad guy. But Bill turns out to be both a former like business and research partner of Ashley's parents, who is through his jealousy responsible for the murder of Ashley's mom, but is also the son of Franny and thus technically Dee's nephew, which is funny because obviously Bill is a grown man and Dee is a little kid, but you know, Daniel stopped growing up when he died. It's Casper mode all the time. But yeah, and just the way that like these stories get kind of intersected, you know, kind of converging in the final little act of the game, coming along to the another system, and you know, these experiments with memory replacement. Ashley's parents and Bill were working on technology that would allow them to implant false memories in people as a way to help like people move past PTSD. I think was the primary reason for that. Was the premise. But obviously there's a lot of...
I was just going to say, and of course, there's no way capitalism could ruin that. That very altruistic science research. There's no way capitalism could ruin it.
Yeah. Well, and then of course, Bill murders Ashley's mom and then uses the system to implant fake memories in Ashley's father of him committing the murder. So now he's walking around with the memories of this murder that he can't believe he committed. And thankfully again, we're able to use the system to, kind of reverse that damage and uncover the truth of like, no, these were implanted memories. This technology was used maliciously. Bill was behind it all along. Both the murder, the stealing of the technology, the misuse of the technology, which leads to the big final confrontation in the caverns under the mansion, where we get some kind of ironic echoes of Dee's own death in a lot of ways, if you would like to wrap everything up with a bow.
Sure, why not? So once you find this out and Bill actually Bill murdered Sayoko, Ashley's mother, he is about to shoot Richard, which is Ashley's dad. And then all of a sudden, Dee appears before him and tells him that he's making Franny cry. And the shock causes Bill to fall down and drop to his death. So that's what it says in Wikipedia.
I actually remember it slightly different. No, that's right. Actually, now that I think about it, I didn't remember that because that's slightly different in the remake. The remake has it where he runs and ends up going over the same. He runs from the ghost and goes over the same edge of a cliff that Dee accidentally fell down as a kid. So there's like an ironic echo in there. One that kind of takes maybe a little bit more of the culpability away from Dee in his death, which I think is maybe a good change.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think he has
primary
any
change.
He was defending people. He was defending the people from getting murdered, and he was also avenging his dad in essence. Because even though it wasn't Bill that did it, it was his dad didn't really deserve to be avenged. His dad did try to murder his brother, and then his brother acted in self.
Well, it's just kind of the poor, complicated circumstances of their whole family. Because again, like his dad, they were both messed up from war. They were trying to discover and work through their trauma through different art forms that their father was not allowing them to express themselves in. Like there is very much like a great story about like good and bad parenting paying itself forward and how you break out of that. There is stories of how like there's a bit of a theme about how we move on past trauma. With the idea being kind of that like trying to repress or cover up memories is not really the way to do it. That it's really more about like the support of family and community that allows you to move on past trauma. But the other major change that I remember from the remake, and I'm assuming you did not play the remakes.
No, I did not.
Okay. Is so in the DS game, if I remember correctly, it's way more clear that Bill is primarily jealous because he's infatuated with Ashley's mom. That it is romantic jealousy, right, that causes him to kill, to lash out against the both of them and to end up killing the mother. And in the remake, that is scrubbed almost entirely to refocus instead on it being a purely capitalistic element of like down to him trying to like transfer the information to an outside buyer, before he can be stopped. So it focuses more heavily on the idea that this is purely just he is a greedy person who wants the financial gain of I don't care about the implications of this science. I just want to profit from it. I don't know that I necessarily like either version more. I just think it's interesting that was changed.
I think like I don't know, because I will say the original doesn't seem like it can pick a lane with the motivation for Bill. It makes it seem like you said, like it's very clear, like he had romantic feelings towards Ashley's mom. But then also like later on, when her dad is like questioning him and being like, hey, when Richard is questioning him, like, don't you realize this could be used for all the wrong reasons? And the guy's like, it's capitalism. Who cares? I'm obviously paraphrasing. he kind of has both, and they don't really commit to one or the other, or commit to a stronger of the two, or even commit to the fact that like it was tied. It feels like there are two separate events that have nothing to do with each other, even though they're very clearly have everything to do with each other. So I will say it's a very minor critique of it, but like it is a little bit of a problem where like it doesn't really fully commit to one, the other, or both. It just kind of puts both of them out there, and then that's it. It doesn't really give you 100% like Bill feels like wishy-washy in his motivations. It's like this and then that and then this and then that. And it's probably a combination of the two, but then that should be either explicitly stated or find a way to better imply that to the audience.
Yeah, like a real person, it would have been a combination of things, right? It would have been a real Bill would have been both had that romantic attraction, but then like always kind of wanted to find ways to profit and found and been like in real life. Not that, again, reality should ever be your North Star for a good story. But the idea of somebody feeling like a lover spurned and thus committing murder doesn't work as well when it's like you're into somebody who's married and very clearly happy with her husband and is returning zero of that interest to you, right? Like, but also like I don't remember the capitalist element being super hardcore in the original version, which I remember even then really being wasn't. Like, that's crazy that like, why is this guy to like, the villain's always both. The villain's always like got a hang up about, you know, somebody who wronged them, but also trying to make a little money. It's they could have threaded that better. And instead it kind of feels like each version of the game ends up having, just a drastically different motivation. When the reality is they probably could have worked both out together. And I don't know if they're trying to scrub the romantic jealousy plot line, because it's not icky. It's not like a thing that would need to be censored or scrubbed for like a modern audience. Like, even if that was the attitude you took, that doesn't fly as a reason for me. I just, it goes back to editing, right? Somebody and taking another pass at the sequel, or not the sequel, the remake. There were some things they wanted to change. They made it more explicitly clear that Dee cannot go through walls, right? Which is why he can't just Casper his way around and be like, "Oh, there's your dad, found him." You know, like they did think about how they wanted to reapproach certain things. So I'm curious why that change was made, and I've never really actively looked into it. But I find it to be an interesting change that they completely changed Bill's motivation. But you're right in the end that it's like weirdly kind of regardless of that motivation, we have this very abrupt ending that kind of ends more as a result of things happening to collide in a certain way than through any specific action on the side of Ashley or Dee or Richard. Which is probably the best. You don't want your 14-year-old protagonist like maybe killing a dude.
Yeah. Or like,
you know, it's a Disney death. He has a Disney death.
He does. And also in like other games, there would be some other games of this era. I wouldn't like, they probably would have shoehorned a romance, like not an actual romance, but oh, I think I kind of like this D guy, you know, but he's a ghost. How can
they would have had to be like the blushy, crushy feelings, and like the game doesn't do that at all.
No, it's just straight friend. It's just straight friendship, and it's just very it's nice to see, because so often there's always some this is a very random sequitur, but I've been rereading the Narnia books since I read them when I was a kid. And if you ever read Prince Caspian and then watch the Disney version of the 2006 Disney movie or whatever it is, maybe it's 4, I forget when they came out, maybe 2008, whatever, not important. There's a romance between Prince Caspian and Susan in the movie that is not in the books at all.
I never watched the movie, so that's crazy to me.
It's completely unnecessary. And it's out of the fucking blue. The end of the movie, they kiss for no reason, other than the fact that Ben Barnes is a really good-looking man. That's the only reason I can think of. And I think Anna Popplewell's cute.
It was to fit into a format of like what a modern audience kind of wants to see. That's purely it. Very curious to see what Greta Gerwig does with The Magician's Apprentice, or Magician's Nephew, not Magician's Apprentice.
I'm very curious as well,
but anyway,
that's one of the few that has not been adapted. But anyway, so like it does. Putting a romantic thing, or even like a teenage version of a romantic thing in it, is not always needed, and I'm very glad they did not, because that would have been something of the time to do. I.e. Casper the movie, the Christina Ricci movie.
That was Christina Ricci, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Wow. I
That's funny. But anyway, we can actually
nobody
wrap this
at the
one
time
up.
Would have seen Yellow Jackets coming. That's all I'm saying.
Or you ever see Black Snake Moan or whatever it is?
Yeah.
That's a wild Christina Ricci movie.
Oh God, yeah. That's God, that's her in that too. I didn't even think about that with Samuel L. Jackson. Wow, that's whew. Girls had a weird career. Love it. But yeah, the point. The game does wrap itself up, kind of awkwardly, kind of abruptly. But we do end up in a position where Ashley has her dad back. We know. And we understand the circumstances why he thought that he had to be separated from her. Mm-hmm. And that's been cleared up. And we have a semi rejoining of the family, depending on how you did as a solving puzzles and what optional things you did. D can either kind of like rest in peace or not, basically. Yep.
If I did look it up. If you don't solve what happened to him, then you have a tearful goodbye, and he just walks the rest of the island still like confused as to what happened. If he does not remember, if you don't find enough information for him to remember how he died, he will stay wandering the island as a ghost. But because you, at least with my playthrough, once you get everything and he figures out and he remembers how he died, then when you leave, he says, "I can rest in peace now. Thank you." And then he goes off into the ether.
Yeah, I think that maybe the remake gets rid of that and just goes with only a good ending. Especially given the climax is very tied up in recreating specifically the way that D died. Wasn't true in the original, but also because at this point, like the remake is packaged in with a remake of the sequel, which has to follow up like D's not a player in the sequel, but like it does have to give you like a canon ending to part one, to continue straight through as one contiguous story, because it's not really an end, it's a middle. In a way that, by the way, like, again, if anyone here has the opportunities to play these games, it's going to be the remakes realistically, unless you find a pretty rare and I'm sure very expensive copy of the original.
It's not that
you're going to be
expensive.
playing the remakes. Okay, that's good. I know there are not a ton of copies, but it was also not a high demand game. So, But yeah, I think when you play the remakes, they are, packaged together, and it is much more specifically kind of structured in a way that makes it feel like the end of the first game is more like the end of Act 1, with the second game being sort of an Act 2 and 3, in a way that like the through line of the story works very well, with not a ton of changes from the original games. So, a very good experience if you track down the remakes on the Switch.
Side note, the original DS version is $16 if you just have the loose cartridge, and $30 for the whole thing complete in box. So it's not that expensive to try if you can find a copy.
That's not bad at all. Yeah. Okay.
Not bad at all.
I love that. Look, plenty of us still have functioning 3DSs sitting around, right, to play physical DS games.
Something I did not realize, that if you play the game and you do a new game plus, save data, you'll get another post-credit scene, apparently, where Ashley receives a letter wishing her a happy sweet 16, which foreshadows the event of the sequel, which now I might have to play for a future episode if I can get my hands on the Switch collection of Another Code. That would be fun.
I think so. It's very, very good. Very interesting. I mean, it's more of this. It is a different location and a different primary mystery, but like I think thematically it flows very well directly from the first game into the second.
I'm excited. I'll have to give it a try. But we're going to wrap this one up, Derek. I think we've discussed everything we need to for this one. So I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. Nearly, actually, now that I'm looking at the recording, like over an hour and a half of just chatting about Trace Memory. So thank you so much for that. Why don't you, to wrap this up, tell the good listeners a little bit about your show, your two shows, and where they can find you online.
Yeah, so you can find me. The only real social media I do anymore is Blue Sky, where I'm just at derekvandyke.bsky.social. Although you can also find me occasionally streaming just for funsies on Twitch as Derby City Derek. The two shows that I do, the big one is Castle Bravo, a Godzilla vs. retrospective. Me and my sister and co-host Charlotte have been going through all of the Godzilla and Godzilla related movies in chronological order, kind of breaking down like the production art behind them, what themes we find in them, putting them into the historical context of how we went from, this original movie into the modern day. And I've really gained, obviously, you can see in the background, I have this painting of Godzilla fighting Rodan in the background. Like, I'm a big Godzilla fan, obviously, but I've gained a newfound appreciation for the art and the messaging of these movies as a result of that. I have a ton of guests on for that. It's a pretty good time. You can listen to me and Charlotte go through multiple life crises over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 years. And then I've started up a new show called Pixel Spectrum. I've been doing gaming podcasting for close to a decade, been connected to, and in the middle of all of these circles for ages. But Pixel Spectrum is my new project. It is purely me. It is a produced and recorded when I feel like it and have time, because I'm a very busy person with a very demanding day job. But so far I have quite a few, I think, really interesting episodes out. And I've got a couple of good interviews and guests I'm getting lined up. So it's not going to be, a weekly show or anything, but hit that sub button and, catch episodes when they drop. I try to bring the vibe to anything I do of being casual but intellectual. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make you laugh, but I want to be intelligent about the things I say, but I don't want to come across as stuck up in the process. I'd like to think I do a pretty good job of having the vibe of like your laid back English professor in college who definitely smokes pot between classes. So that's the vibe I try to bring to Castle Bravo as well as to Pixel Spectrum. So if folks want to check that out, that's fantastic. And thank you for having me on. This is a wonderful time. We got to make a new connection here. We got to chat about a game that I think made a little bit of an impact on both of us that I really wish more people would experience. And maybe some of your listeners will listen to this episode and check it out.
I hope they check it out as well. And I hope they check out both your shows. I will include links to all of the stuff you mentioned, your Blue Sky, Twitch, if you want it out there, and your two podcasts in the show notes. As for myself, you can follow me on social media at stillloadingpodcast.com on Blue Sky, at stillloadingpod on Instagram and Twitch. On Twitch, I stream whenever the hell I'm able to. It really just depends on my schedule. Most recent stream at the time this recording, just to put this in a real time and place, I did the full history of James Bond and video games. I've done it as a panel at a convention, and I streamed the whole presentation on there. That was fun. But that's all the places you can find me on social media and online. If you like the show and you want to support it, though, please consider giving it a 5-star rating or review on whichever podcasting app you use. It helps more people find the show, and it pleases the algorithm gods, or something along those lines. There's also a Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For as little as $1 a month, you get all the episodes earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which help guide the direction of the show, like this episode here. So if you want to help pick future games for me to talk about and play, maybe torture myself with, though this one was not a torture, but some games that go up there may be torturous. Who knows? That's all over there for just $1 a month. For $3 a month, you get everything I mentioned at the previous tier, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get all the previous stuff, plus 2 mini bonus episodes. And for $5 a month, you get everything. All the previous tiers, all the bonus episodes, early access, voting rights, shoutouts, all that good stuff, and access to my monthly movie podcast, which right now, the time this episode comes out, is still Muppeting. It's the only Muppet movie podcast where me and Doug from the Nostalgia Marcana podcast play the music, light the lights, and we talk about the Muppets on Still Muppeting tonight. And when that series is over, it's going to be some other still loading related pun to whichever topic I'm going for. So that is all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But that's it. That is all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Derek, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me. And that's a wonderful reminder. I need to bug Doug about the episode we've been talking about doing. So
there you go. But yeah, that's it. Thank you all so much for listening. And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.